Well, hello and welcome to On Second Street, where today we've got our The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly panel, where we're going to be talking about what's going right and wrong in Canadian politics. Tristin Hopper, who is a columnist from the National Post and is also the author of Don't Be Canada, How One Country Got Everything Wrong All at Once. He joins us, as well as Kris Sims, the Alberta director from the Canadian Taxpayers Federation. Thank you both for taking a few minutes to chat with us today about some of the recent activities in Canadian politics. I want to ask you about something right here in Calgary that is interesting, but I think it could also affect people in other parts of the country. And that is, it's pretty well known. We've had two major water main breaks. These are massive, where the pipes burst. They call them these trunk pipelines that carry massive volumes of water. And when this happened, everyone in the city was affected. We were told to vastly reduce our water use. I mean, I think this is pretty well known. It's happened twice now in a year. But what's interesting is a column that was recently in the National Post that looked at just how much the city has been taking out of the city's water utility. So not only did they neglect to upgrade and fix these major pipes, but they were also taking money from the utility, over $1 billion over the past decade. I'm guessing you both have seen this. Kris, let's talk with you first of all. What are your thoughts on this massive blunder here in Calgary?
That it could be happening in a lot of cities and municipalities across Canada. So folks need to pay attention to this. Um, Over the last 15 years, I've noticed that as local newsrooms have been hollowed out, there's been less and less attention being paid at city halls. And this is the kind of nonsense that happens when nobody is paying attention or few are able to pay attention. It used to be a couple of decades ago that you would have local reporters and ratepayer organizations that were just targeted for that city watching these folks like hawks. But over the years, that number has dwindled. And then you wind up with these politicians who are frankly getting bamboozled by their bureaucracy at City Hall, and they're being run roughshod by the management, by the permanent government there. And frankly, it's the permanent government that's supposed to be doing things like maintaining the water system. And if they're not doing that and
Hmm.
they're taking money out of it, man, some heads have got to roll.
Yeah, I mean, that's the incredible thing. I mean, I know when I
It
was
is.
in Winnipeg, the same problem there. The city used to constantly take money from its water utility. They called it a dividend instead of a cash grab. And so money that was meant for maintaining that infrastructure was being spent on everything else, including, some pretty wasteful things. Tristin, what's your take on this?
Just the fact that if it's happening in Calgary, it does mean it could be a risk almost anywhere. I mean, Calgary, when you arrive in Calgary from almost any other part of Canada, it does stand out how much cleaner and newer and seemingly more well maintained the infrastructure is. So, I mean, you could drive on a Calgary freeway. I'm sure if you live in Calgary, you're disagreeing with this, but the rate of potholes, the rate of cleanliness, the amount of graffiti is noticeably lower than almost any other part of the country. So even in a city that normally would seem to have the best infrastructure in Canada, they can't even keep water pipes from exploding, bringing stuff into the city. So it also speaks to priorities. Water pipes are the number one priority. I mean, that's more important than public art. That's more important than public festivals. If you don't have water, your city crumbles and everybody dies. So to see that even at these baselines, you're just not respecting sort of a very core responsibility of government in favor of
Oh.
other things in a city that generally, at least recently, was able to do infrastructure quite well. I was in Calgary, and I made a point of actually seeing where the water line had broken. It's
Mm.
one thing I've noticed going into Calgary. There's two things you immediately notice: a lot of beefy dudes in cowboy hats, and then as soon as you get to your hotel, there's a sign saying, "Please, oh God, don't drink the water." So that's not a good look on the city.
No, it's not good. It's even crazier when you think about what they've been spending this money on. Literally hundreds of employees, city employees getting three pensions,
Yep.
hundreds of millions of dollars going towards a new arena, hundreds of millions of dollars going for a new arts building. Public art all over the place. I like public art, but there's no reason why the city has to
Actually,
spend the
the
money
water
on it.
main
Some lots of good
break
models in other
is
cities.
just down. It's about 10 minutes away from the Canadian Taxpayers Federation has highlighted this. That really dumb piece of public art, they call it like the all-time champion, and it's just pieces of metal with
Yeah.
rocks. So it's almost within sight. I saw both of them. So, it's very poetic. Your water's broken, but you got this crappy piece of public art.
Crazy. We got to take a commercial break, but when we come back, I want to talk to you guys about a decision about our passports, and an interesting one from Ottawa. We'll be back in just a moment. We're back on 2nd Street talking about some recent issues for our Good, the Bad, and the Ugly episode. I think this is actually an example of a good bit of news that we're seeing from the government. It's kind of uncharacteristic, but the federal government has announced that if you don't get your passport in 30 days, it's free. And I was surprised by this because, of course, there were so many problems just a year or two ago with the processing of passports. It was taking months and months and months and months, to the point where some people are canceling trips. To hear them come out with this, I thought this was actually a bit of good news. Kris, what was your reaction when you heard about this story?
Suspicion. I think I'm like, really? What's the catch? Sorry, I've been in the game for a long time, so it always makes me cynical and suspicious. But all that said, I know people do need some good news. If that's true, that's good. It reminded me of the old Domino's pizza commercial back in the 1980s and 90s. It's at your door within 30 minutes or it's free, or whatever it is, 40 minutes or it's free. If that's true, then that's good. I will say, I got a passport a few years ago and it was super terrible and it took forever. I got a passport within the last 6 months and it was efficient and organized and it arrived. So as long as nobody makes eye contact with this thing, maybe it'll actually start working better. So that's a bit of good news.
Good stuff. I mean, it's welcome news. Tristin, what was your reaction?
My reaction would be much more suspicious and negative than either of you two optimists. I mean, the first time I see this, first of all, if it's free, we don't know if there's any consequences for the department that did this. So you have a department that can't, their only job is to create passports, and allegedly, increasingly, they can't do it anymore. So something's wrong with that particular system. The 30 days or it's free policy, how do we know there's any responsiveness within this? Maybe we'll just, all of the passports will just be free, and, the incentive to actually create them faster. So we don't know what that looks on the back end. Are people getting pay cuts? Are they getting a stern lecture from their manager if they're failing to get these passports out in time? And I've also seen a generalized culture within the government of Canada, which says, well, if we're not delivering on, if there's wait lines, if there's backlogs, we just sort of make it more efficient. We sort of rush it through. And the most disastrous application of that has been in something sort of peripheral to the passports, which has been immigration. So we've seen a vast automation of the process just in the last few years. We're overwhelmed by temporary migrants. We're overwhelmed by new immigrants. So the response largely has been, well, let's just let AI do that. Let's let an algorithm do that. Let's automate most of this process. And only now are we starting to see some of the more catastrophic consequences of that. Most recently was finding out that a pretty large share of asylum seekers are getting granted refugee status in Canada, despite never actually sitting in front of a refugee officer. They say, well, we don't have time to do it. The backlog is 2 years. We'll just create this special list of countries. This is really the system. And if you come from that country, we can approve your application just based on the written documents. Which means you never have an in-person chat, and that's usually if you have a scam refugee. We have a lot of scam refugees these days. You're usually going to turn them up in the interview. So anyway, and I've also seen that in other aspects of immigration law. So I would caution against this idea that we're going to fix things simply by pushing more passports out the door. So the reaction of Passport Canada could be, oh, we'll just start handing out passports without any screening whatsoever. And then, there's a major terrorist attack by people with Canadian passports somewhere in Europe. And we realize the folly of this problem. So there's something causing us to not deliver passports on time and just cracking the whip and saying, get them out the door faster. I mean, that's kind of a classic USSR approach to it. Just we need more passports, raw passports, and then you're good. All the other stuff doesn't really matter as much.
This is why I was suspicious,
that's
Colin.
a good.
This is why.
Yeah. Well, I think it's a fair point, especially if you consider what Tristan's saying. Yeah, in the past few years, they've really dropped the ball in terms of immigration. Maybe if you put that segment, okay, everyone who came in the last 4 years aside, I mean, the other chunk of Canadians that want their passports renewed, you'd think that could be pretty easy. I mean, it's not rocket science to just verify if the person's gone abroad and caused any problems, or if they're committing any crimes here in Canada or whatever. I mean, all that should be pretty easy to check quickly. That I don't know. I guess I get your point, though. We'll have to see, but let's keep our fingers crossed on this one. When we come back, I want to talk to you about another little bit of good news involving the cost of buying a home in Canada. We'll be back in just a moment. And we're back on 2nd Street. This time we're going to be talking about the cost of buying a new home. The Ontario government has announced that they're going to take the HST off of the cost of a new house for the next year. Tristin, I'll start with you first this time. What are your thoughts on this? I mean, obviously, the cost of buying a home is pretty expensive in Canada. Any thoughts on what the Ford government has announced?
So I'm sure Ms. Sims will like that there's less tax being charged, and that makes sense. However, when you look at government housing policy, there's basically two ways. We have a housing shortage, and there's basically two factors in that. You got your demand side and you got your supply side. Governments love doing demand side. Demand side. We're going to give. Here's a bursary to give you more money. Here's a new tax-free savings account to allow you to get more money to buy a house. So they love doing the stuff that puts more money into the market. You need a particular amount of money for a down payment. You need to take up the HST. But all this does is it unleashes more capital to be thrown into the real estate market, thus inflating prices further. Meanwhile, on the supply side, you have almost no reforms. I'm actually making it easier to build homes, more places to build homes, less red tape, less regulation. All of those things that would actually put more homes in Canada. So I see this, I know we all don't like the HST, but the net effect of this is that you will allow more money to be spent on homes, thus eventually bidding up those home prices even more. And that's essentially what we've seen over the last 10, 20 years. It's government devising new and more creative ways to have people commit more money, use more bursaries, use whatever to throw more money into the real estate sector. And thus it's the world's worst, most unaffordable real estate sector. And now it's slightly more than that before. So to keep doing this, and this is all they like doing without any changes to the supply side. And there's lots of very easy, meaningful changes to the supply side that Doug Ford could have done, and he's not doing. I think the net effect of this is more unaffordable homes.
Kris, what's your take?
Tristin is unfortunately right. So yeah, it is nice to have no tax for a year on a new house. But I'll put it this way. A lot of working couples, two people working incomes, couldn't afford a $1 million house or a $1.5 million house anyway. So yes, it's good technically to have no sales tax on this new house. I don't know who's buying these things brand new or how they're able to even do it. He's right about the supply side. There's something that's quite descriptive that Pierre Poilievre often says, and it's just so true. Canada is humongous. It is full of wood and lumber, and we got a lot of cement and concrete plants and rebar manufacturers around. Why on earth are our housing prices so high? So yeah, something definitely dramatically has to be done about the supply side. And that obviously starts with all three levels of government, including municipal. They have got to get out of the way. They have to incentivize people to actually build homes so that the supply is bigger and the price comes down. It's not super complicated economics here. So yes, technically it's good. Yay, no Ontario sales tax for one whole year on a brand new house. Very similar to what Mark Carney had announced during the last election. But we got to tackle the supply side problem. And again, it's largely government's fault.
Also gypsum.
Yeah, I don't disagree with anything.
We've got wood. We also have gypsum. We can make the drywall.
That's true. My brother's a drywaller.
Doesn't get enough.
That's true. He points this out.
That's right.
Yeah, we
gypsum.
talked about drywall last time too, I remember.
Okay,
The thing that's
that's a
interesting
shame.
is that the
Recurring
Ontario
theme.
home builders groups home builders groups will talk about how they're building these homes but no one can afford them. So they need people to be able to buy them and get those prices dropped. And I don't know, I kind of feel like this is actually a step in the right direction because yes, you have
Yeah.
to increase the supply 100%. We got all the space, as you pointed out, we got all the materials. We got to work on that too, but it's not even just the
It's
GST. Like in Ontario, there's reports that like taxes and fees make up like 25 to 30% of the cost of a home because it's become a cash grab.
Yeah.
I
Oh,
don't
yeah.
know. It feels like
yeah.
I'll give
governments need to
really
do
quick
quite a bit
where
more to
Tristan is
really restrain. Go for it, Kris.
Where Tristan is in BC, last I checked in their budget, the land transfer tax gave the government about $1 billion. Like, it's an astonishing amount
Yeah,
of money. It's a major revenue stream
yeah.
for government. That's just one tax in one province. So yeah,
Oh, yeah.
big time.
Yeah, no, it certainly feels like there's a lot of tax and spend abuse going on there when it comes to buying homes.
but
When we come
unleashing more
back, I want to
money.
talk to you about
Okay,
some of
no,
the love to keep
keep
going on this one. We've got to tackle issue number 4 right in your backyard, Tristan. That's a recent decision on Aboriginal land claim in British Columbia and some of the stuff that's going on out there. We'll be back in just a moment. And welcome back to On Second Street. Tristan, I want to ask you about what's happening out in British Columbia. You've got another case where a judge has ruled in favor of taking large swaths of land and handing it over to Aboriginal communities that have made claims on those land, most recently involving Nootka Island. What is happening big picture in British Columbia for people outside the province who are kind of wondering, like, what is going on out there?
something like this particular decision, if this had happened 2-3 years ago, I don't think anybody would have noticed. And there has been sort of a various court cases or settling of particular land claims with the government. So this has been happening at a low level for 10, 15 years. But the public mood now, after the Richmond decision, so the Cowichan decision, declaring Aboriginal title over a section of Richmond, now nobody can sell their houses. You've seen massive collapses in real estate values because of the uncertainty as a result of that. I think suddenly people are realizing, well, there's no limiting principle here. So Aboriginal title, I thought, was just taking pieces of Crown land we weren't using anyway and giving it back to the people who originally used to use it. That's why a lot of this stuff was highly uncontroversial. So I've been in rooms filled with not tremendously progressive-minded men, and they would still say, well, the Nishka was the first modern treaty. That treaty is settled, and you never hear from the Nishka. Logging and other resource industries are booming there. Thus, it's a net good thing that you're giving higher indigenous control over resources and land. But this decision, it comes in a public context of, you read the details of the decision, and you have evidence of Nootka uses of this particular parts of the island, and you just have a judge saying, well, let's give them 40% of the island. So you're looking at this, and it's. I think people are troubled by how arbitrary it seems, in that you will have historical records, and there's actually anthropological evidence here. But then at the end of the day, you basically have a judge with unlimited power to take very large pieces of land and grant them to often very small communities. So I think there's a much higher scrutiny on this because I think people are realizing this isn't tremendously sustainable. So the precedent it's setting, it's fine if it was just this decision or another decision, but the more decisions you have like this, you're realizing, well, there's no point at which this stops. Judges have almost unlimited power to grant Aboriginal title to very large swaths of land, even the ones with homeowners already living on it.
Yeah, it seems crazy. It goes back to what Kris had just mentioned, and that is this idea that you're spending $1 billion in transfer taxes. Well, what's behind that? It's because the government is saying that essentially you're registering the property in your land, you own it. This is the one signal the government's giving you is that yes, indeed, that you have bought this property from this person who owns it. And now you've got the court saying, well, wait a second, that person doesn't really own it. We've decided to give it to these people.
Yeah. So
Kris,
I'll
are
see.
you?
I'll see. Oh, go on, Ms. Sims.
I
I
just
grew
want to
up
give Kris
on
a
the
chance
West
to
Coast.
weigh in on this.
Yeah, real quick. I grew up
Yeah.
on the West Coast, and so I've been following this even since I was a kid. Vancouver Island largely.
Hmm.
And when they first started doing this, there was some environmental concerns of like, oh, well, what laws apply to this area that has now been given over to this certain band council or whoever's running it? Like, are they going to be paving estuaries, like putting parking lots on these areas? So that was the initial back in the 90s during Clackwat and that. Those were those
Yeah.
concerns. Now, fast forward, here we are in 2026. And people are suddenly realizing we don't have private property rights in the charter and in the Constitution. That was a huge mistake in the early 1980s under the original Trudeau. Thanks very much. We don't have proper property rights enshrined in our Constitution. At the Taxpayers Federation, we're fighting that. We think we need to go back to the baseline, start there, and then we can start working back forward and allowing people to actually own the homes and property that they paid for. And by the way, they pay property taxes on every year.
Yeah. Listen, we're out of time. It's not a bad start, Kris, for sure. Thank you both for taking a few minutes to chat today, and look forward to our next conversation.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, if you have any feedback on these topics or something else you think we should cover, we'd love to hear it. You can send us a note at ideas@thenewsforum.ca. As always, thanks for tuning in. We hope we'll see you again next week.